Sportsman's Radio with your host, motivational speaker Greg Dwyer. Be sure to check out Greg at www.gregdwyer.com. That's www.gregdwyer.com. Now on to our show. Take it away, Greg.
So if you are in sales or you just have to work with people, influence people, you're at the right place. Today is part 2. Last week we talked about this topic, how to know what people are thinking without being a mind reader. You don't have to be a mind reader. You don't have to spend years studying mind reading and reading books. We're looking at general ways of knowing what people are thinking. Is it 100% foolproof? No, not necessarily. In fact, even the top mentalists and mind readers in the world still make mistakes. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. All you have to do is jump in and just practice, and you have to practice with people, and the more you practice, the better you get. That's really my biggest advice. So today, we're going to talk about my favorite subject, profiling. Everybody does it, especially in law enforcement or in real estate sales or insurance sales or legal work. People make judgments, specifically if their career depends on it. Now, we talked about this last week. We all do this to extent. I mean, we meet someone new or we talk to somebody on the phone. In fact, I got a phone call not too long ago. Somebody hired me and I was on the phone with them for 5 or 10 minutes. In my mind, I had an idea who they were. You create it, use your imagination, and then you meet them. And somewhat similar to what you imagine, in some cases not, but when you listen to a person and you see a person, you can have an advantage of figuring out what makes them tick. And that's really what profiling is all about. Now, one of the easiest ways, and you don't always have this advantage, is to visit them in their home. Now, that's not always possible, especially in a professional situation. But if you go into a person's house and you see how everything is arranged or not arranged, and you see what's important to them in their home and how they keep their home, that will tell you a lot about the person. Now, if you can't go to their house, here's an easy solution. Look at how they're dressed. How do they present themselves? Their clothing, the colors. Are they wearing a suit? Are they wearing a t-shirt? How are they dressed? We're sizing people up. You do this, I do this, we all do this, but I'm talking about doing this in a conscious effort to get into another person's head. So you look at a person, you listen to them. Another thing that you can do, and you may have heard this before, is you watch their eyes, right? So visual, auditory, kinesthetic are 3 modes of how people filter their world. So if you ask me, I'm very visual. So if you ask me a question, I'm going to tend to look up. I talk fast, I'm visual, I think in pictures, right? So I'm visually focused in that direction. Other people are kinesthetic and they talk a lot slower and they might look down. Either literally look down or their eyes will go down and they don't talk as fast. It's more of a feeling. And so the way that they construct the world is based on their feelings. And of course, they're going to talk a lot slower, right? So these are clues. Someone that's talking really fast, pictures flying through their head, they're looking up, you ask them a question, they're looking up to the left or the right. They're making pictures, they're remembering pictures, you know that they are visually oriented. Somebody that's kinesthetic will talk slower, look down. Somebody that's auditory will look to the left, the right, they'll look back and forth, and they're listening to themselves, what they're saying to themselves. Why is it important? Well, as you're meeting somebody, you want to kind of profile them and figure out what makes them tick. If you can't go to their house, you can at least look how they present themselves as far as their clothing, but you could also ask them questions and see where they look and how they talk and their tone of voice and whether they're looking up or looking side to side or looking down. These are all clues to figure out how a person processes reality. This is what we call profiling. We do it all the time. Sometimes we don't think about it, but We do it. Now, all I can tell you is the more you practice, the better you will be. Just the other day, I was doing a performance at a private party. There's about 60 people in the room, people outside, I should say. And I would walk up to people and start a conversation and engage them and then show them some kind of mind reading. And one lady, she was sitting near the pool with her husband and her son, and I just looked at her. And I just went with my gut. I said, "Are you an artist? I have a feeling that you are an artist." And she goes, "No, I'm not an artist." I said, "Really?" "Well, I just got that feeling." She goes, "Well, don't get me wrong. I love to paint. I love to paint by numbers." And I said, "Yeah, that's what I was getting at, you know?" So it's almost like you're fishing for information, and it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to say something and realize that you're way off, because in reality, I don't think we're ever going to know someone else perfectly. In fact, I don't think we can even know ourselves perfectly. Years ago, I went to Europe and I met this person, the woman that I was really impressed with, her customer service. And a few years later, she decided to come to the States, and we went out to dinner one night, and I found a connection for her to have a job or to find a job, and she did that for a couple months over the summer. And my perception of this person was great customer service, going out of her way to do whatever she could to help people. When she left the job, things didn't go that well, and there were a lot of problems with her and the person that employed her. And I saw a side of her that was surprising. We all have dark sides, or we have sides that we don't let everybody know about. My point is this: when we're doing profiling, when we're talking to people and trying to figure out where they're coming from, don't be afraid of being wrong, because they're probably not sharing with us everything. They may have some areas of their life that they're holding back on. And, all we can do is do our best with trying to make a connection with them. And that's really the key, asking questions. Now, here's a secret, and it's amazing if people go here. If you ask a person about their childhood, and I don't know how you bring it up, but sometimes you can. In fact, I was in Vegas about a week or so ago, and I asked the person that I met at a party, I says, "Hey, were you born here?" And I know most people not born in Vegas. And she goes, "No." And within 5 minutes, she told me the history of where she was born and her family dynamics. I don't want to go into it. But in that 5 minutes of telling me where she was raised and how her mom and dad were together and how they separated and got divorced, I pretty much got a good idea of why she's single and why she's doing what she's doing with her life. Now, you're not always going to be perfect with this, but if you can find out how things were in a person's childhood, were they traumatic, or was there a lot of trauma? Did they have a happy childhood? What's their perception of it? Was there something that happened to them? Now, again, this might not be appropriate in a business relationship. You just have to figure out when to ask. But the key is to ask questions and get people to talk, because the more that you get them to talk, the more they're going to give you clues. And I have to tell you, a lot of times people will say things to you and then they forgot that they told you. I was on a conversation with somebody a couple months back, and I just asked a couple questions, and they started just going on and on about their childhood and what they did for a living and this and that, and talking about their family dynamics. And then I began to do a reading for them, a personality reading, and I was able to feather back, as you say, you feather back, you give them back what they gave you. And she was like, "I can't believe you know that about me. Like, you knew that I worked for XYZ company, you knew this." Now, 5, 10, 15 minutes before, they had told me that information. So a lot of times, people don't remember what they tell you, right? So micro impressions are really powerful. Now, what's a micro impression? If you can catch somebody off guard, right? Like, in other words, let's say someone's in the other room and you happen to walk in and they look up and they are surprised to see you. There's a micro impression on their face of what they're thinking about you. Like, in other words, let's say they're doing something, they're cutting meat or they're cutting celery, they're doing something else, right? And then you just walk in on them. It could be a friend, it could be a colleague, it could be someone you don't really know, right? And what happens is they look up at you, they don't expect you to be there, and in that split second, if you're really careful, you can read their mind by figuring out what they're thinking because they're surprised. This happened to me not too long ago. I walked into a room, person didn't expect me, and within a nanosecond, I thought, okay, I kind of have a feeling of what this person thinks of me. In other words, if you walk into a room and someone just smiles and it's authentic and it just happens, you know, oh wow, they're happy to see you. This doesn't happen all the time, but when it does happen, what's happening is you're catching someone off guard. They can't hide it, right? Because a lot of times we hide behind masks and we hide behind, you know, not telling people what we think and feel, and we tell people what they want to hear and all of these things, and it's hard to penetrate that. But if you can get into a micro expression moment where someone's guard is down, right? And you just surprise them by just walking into the room and, you know, they can't hide that impression. And if you really focus on that and take a picture of that and become very aware of it and internalize it, you can say, oh, this person really likes me. Or, you know, I kind of have a feeling this person doesn't like me. How do I know? I just have a feeling, but it's more than a feeling. You're picking up on micro impressions that you normally would not pick up if people were trying to hide it. So we're talking about profiling. The more you do it, the better you will get. So if you want to practice with your friends, practice with your family, practice with your neighbors, practice with people, getting to know them, asking questions, paying attention to things that you normally would not pay attention to, like micro impressions or the way a person is talking or the way that their eyes are looking. Are they looking up all the time? You know, like if you ask me a question, I'll be looking up most of the time because I'm very, very visual, I think, in pictures. Or auditory, they look left to right or right to left, or kinesthetic, very emotional, they talk very slow. The tone of voice, how they talk. One of the big clues I can say is, hey, what do you do for a living? Or I have a feeling you're a lawyer, I have a feeling you're a doctor, I have a feeling you're a chef, or you know, you're fishing for information. Because let's face it, if a person has spent the last 10 years as a lawyer and they love it, and you figure out why do they love it, that tells you a lot. You know, that's why when people go to parties, hey, what do you do? What do you do for a living? You know, what do you do for a living? Because people want to put you in the category. Oh, you work for the post office. Oh, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a minister, you're an accountant, right? So today we're going to talk about this after the break. Last week we talked about this blue one. And if you recall, this is a person that loves to talk, right? So if you're in a conversation with somebody that has this personality, which is blue, by the way, I'm holding up a blue diamond. This person loves to have fun. This is the most important thing for this kind of person. This person loves to socialize. They love to talk. I told you last week of a story. I was flying on a plane and this person just talked forever, 5 hours. It was hard for me to listen to. People who are of this blue nature, they just love to socialize. They love to be around people. They tend to be extroverts, and they love to talk, and most of all, they love to have fun. Now, here's what I learned, and I shared with this thought with you last week. They tend to marry people of this nature, which is green. I'm holding up a green diamond. And we're going to talk about this because these people balance each other out. If you remember last week, I was telling you about the person that I met on the plane, right? Well, I had a very strong feeling that her husband was this way. And I'm going to talk about that after the break. So let's take a quick 30-second break and we'll be back, and I'll be talking about this green personality.
You've been listening to the Greg Dwyer Radio Show, brought to you by motivational speaker Greg Dwyer on BuildingFortunesRadio.com. Do you wish you could sharpen your focus on what matters most to you and achieve more? Then you owe it to yourself to read Greg's ebook, at GreatWireEbook.com. That's www.GreatWireEbook.com. Download it today and give it away. As always, we want to thank you for listening to the Great Wire Radio Show on Building Fortunes Radio with motivational speaker Greg Dwyer. Now back to our show. Take it away, Greg.
All right, so how do you know what people are thinking about without being a mind reader? First of all, we talked about this last week. People are thinking about themselves, their needs. And profiling is something that we do naturally. Now, people who are in TSA or people who are in law enforcement, people who are in sales, they're pretty good at this, and you can be pretty good at it as well. Focus on people. You know, I had a mentor many years ago. We're talking 30 years ago, Jerry Clark. And he talked about the fact that you can be an expert in your field, whatever it is, but you really want to be an expert in the field of people. You want to figure out what makes people tick, what motivates them. And you want to be able to move people. You want to be able to influence people. It's probably one of the most important things that you can learn. In my career, from my 20s to 30s, I will tell you that breaking point was learning how to work with people, how to understand people. It changed my life. In fact, I went to work for Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's a book you ought to read. But it was during that time of my life where I realized having the knowledge and having the insight and having the education would only bring me so far. Because I focused a good 10, 15 years in education, in degrees and in college degrees and master's degrees and getting formal education and understanding, I guess, being a nerd for the most part. But my life began to change for the better when I shifted my focus from knowledge to understanding people and learning how to connect with them. Am I perfect at it? No. But things began to change for me when I got my focus off myself and started learning how to read people. So that's the reason why I'm doing this. So let's talk about this personality. This is what I call the green personality. Now, they tend to marry people that love to chat and talk and people that love to socialize. What's the green personality? I'm holding up a green diamond. What's the green personality like? Well, these people value being correct. They want to be right. So if you challenge them and you say something to them about anything, they're going to do research to figure out if you're right or they're right. They're going to do research. These people are very detailed oriented, very detailed oriented. They tend to have PhDs, they have higher education, but most of all, they're very nerdy in the sense that they want to make sure that they are correct about the knowledge that you're sharing with them. So let's say you're in real estate sales and you walk into a house and you're showing them a house. Maybe you have, a husband and a wife, and the wife is over here. She's very social and she's looking at the house thinking she's going to entertain all of her friends, right? That's what she cares about, right? I'm holding up the blue diamond. And then you're talking to the husband, and when you're talking to the husband, he is thinking about the square footage, and he's thinking about how much it's going to cost to heat this place. And let's say you just throw out a number of how big the house is, square footage wise, and you're not detailed oriented. I tend to not be very detailed oriented. In the last couple of years, I would say the last 5 years, I've become more detailed oriented because I've had to in my speaking business. You call somebody, you close somebody, you make a sale, you got to remember to follow up, you got to remember to send a contract, you got to remember to get the deposit, you got to remember to show up on time. So my business has forced me to be more detailed oriented. Normally, I just kind of like to see the big picture. These people, they want to see the point. They want to see what's truly important. They're not necessarily big picture people because they kind of crunch down or look at the bottom line numbers. Is this going to work? Are your numbers correct? So, like me, I love to speak in general terms. Like I'll say, oh, the house is, 25,000 square foot or 100, whatever. See, right now, I don't even know what I'm talking about. I'm just throwing out numbers. A detailed oriented person is going to want to know exactly that you're telling the truth to the decibel point, right? So if you want to win these people over, or if you want to at least know what these people are thinking, you have to think the way that they do, which are details and facts, right? Details and facts. Because when it comes to these people, what I call green personality is they, number one, want to be correct, but most of all, they don't want to look bad with data, right? So if you embarrass somebody like this, they're not going to buy the house that you're showing, or they're not going to probably do business with you. So if you're going to sit down with them and you're going to show them homes, or you're going to do business with them, and you know that this is their personality type, right? And sometimes you can tell by, who they're married with, then you have to be very aware of the details. You might not want to talk really fast because, if you're the kind of person that loves to talk very fast and you see pictures flying over, fast coming in, and you're all over the place and you're throwing out general statements, they're going to want you to slow it down, And they're going to want to see the footnotes. They're going to want to see the diagrams, the square footage. They're going to find out, they're going to go to town hall with you. They might go to the neighbors and talk to the neighbors. They might have the water tested, and they might actually drive it to the place of where it needs to get done, and do all of the details and get all of the specs and all of the information. And I don't know about you, I know people like this, right? And this is not to criticize people like this, but people like this, because they don't want to be wrong, they tend not to execute that often, right? So here's what I mean by that. They're going to aim, they're going to focus, they're going to get really clear, they're going to do their due diligence, they're going to study, they're going to get the report done. They're going to make sure every fact is correct, every T is crossed, every I is dotted, and they're going to really make sure that they don't make a mistake. And sometimes the best way to not make a mistake is they're not going to buy the house. They're not going to sell the house. They're not going to execute, because the biggest fear here, right? The biggest fear here is to be wrong. Now, when we talked about the blue last week, that doesn't come into their mindset. They want to have fun, they want to talk, they want to socialize, they want to be with people. Just the other day, I did a presentation. Never met these people. There's 60 people outside around the pool, and I had to size up not only the hosts, but the friends. But what's interesting is the first people that I sized up were the people that hired me, right? The husband and the wife, and seeing how they were interacting with each other, because I'm aware of that. And at the same time, I'm also sizing up their friends, going to this group and that group. And doing this for an hour, you realize really quickly that not everybody sees the world the same way. And so when you're doing mentalism, performance mentalism, or you're reading minds, performance, you realize some people are like really analytical. They're thinking to themselves, well, how are you doing that? Like, you've never met me. We're not friends on Facebook. How do you know? How do you know? How do you know that I am an artist? How'd you know that? And so they're thinking to themselves facts and details, right? Because that's who they are. And then other people, were at the party, they just wanted to have fun. They just wanted to talk. They were amazed. The details, the facts didn't mean anything. They laughed. They had a great time. So how do you know what people are thinking? It's really, really simple. It's called profiling. You look, you ask questions, you see how they're dressed, you see what their home looks like. You ask them about their family, you ask them about their childhood, you get them to talk about themselves. And in the process of really listening, like really, truly listening to people, you're doing profiling. And you say, hey, it sounds to me like, you're this kind of person or this and that. And of course, they're going to give you feedback. And in the process of giving you feedback, you're going to learn more information. I'll end with this. When I was at this presentation that I did at this private affair the other day, this woman said to me, now I was talking about psychic ability and mind reading. This woman said to me, I have a feeling about you since we're talking about mind reading. And I says, oh, really? So what do you think about me? And then she went on and she gave this little kind of speech. And I said, well, to be honest, you're absolutely right. And I says, what we're talking about here is profiling. What we're talking about here is seeing a person, watching them, taking them in, and then kind of reflecting on who do they remind me of. And then saying, you kind of remind me of an artist. You kind of remind me of an engineer or a doctor type. Now, I will tell you, yesterday I said to a gentleman, I says, I think you're a teacher. And he goes, no, I'm not a teacher. I've been in sales. I've been in the printing business my whole life. It's completely wrong, completely wrong. So I think when you get to the point where you're okay with being wrong, because think about it, nobody will ever know a person perfectly. You probably won't even know yourself perfectly, right? Because there's so many sides to you. There's so many different sides to your personality that when you're talking to somebody, if you just said a few things to them like, I get the feeling that you're a very caring person and you're very artistic and you're a very smart person and you love to travel. And they go, no, I hate to travel. I've never been on a plane. I don't like to go anywhere. They're probably not going to remember that you even mentioned that. They're going to remember that you said those other things about their characteristics, about their personality. So remember, people are in their heads, they're thinking about themselves, and in the process, if you just have conversations with them and feed back to them what they've told you and kind of get a gut feeling, watching their eyes, seeing where they're looking, are they talking really fast? Are they talking slow? And realizing that there are some people that want to be right. There are some people that like to socialize. Next week, we're going to talk about another personality, which is this one right here, which is the red one. I'm going to save this until next week. This personality is totally different. It's one of my favorite personalities. You may or may not be able to relate to it, but there are definitely people that have that personality type. Now, the other thing I want to say before I close is this. No one is typecast. In sense, you can have people that are a combination of these colors, combination of these personalities, because we're not just one thing. We do have different ways of expressing ourselves, especially when things are going really well and when things are not going very well. But at the core of who we are, it's pretty easy to tap into that. It's really easy to understand where people are coming from. So, do you have to be a master at this? No. You just simply practice. And in the process of practicing, you'll get better and better. You'll learn how to connect with people. You won't offend people. And I have to tell you from the bottom of my heart, my life changed once I started reading books like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influencing People, and once I understood that it is not about me, it's about your client, it's about your prospect. When you pick up the phone and you're talking to people, they're reading you within an instant and you're reading them. You do it. I would encourage you to do it. And next week, we're going to talk about this red personality, and I hope I gave you something to think about, and I'm pretty sure I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this was great as well. All right, make it a great week. We'll talk to you next week.
You've been listening to the Greg Dwyer Radio Show, brought to you by motivational speaker Greg Dwyer on buildingfortunesradio.com. Check out Greg at gregdwyer.com. Be sure to download his ebook at gregdwyerebook.com to stay focused on what matters most to you. That's www.gregdwyerebook.com.
10 seconds.
Thank you for listening. Now go make a difference in your world.